All right, we're so glad to have you both here today on the Kansas City MomCast to talk about the Casey Heart Walk and then to share a personal story about Joey, and we'll learn more about that in a little bit. But to start, could you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure. My name is Leila Gallagher, and I'm a mom of two, a 13-year-old Joey and a 19-year-old Gia, and we live in Kansas City area, and I run a small business here in Kansas City of promotional products, and yeah, I mean that's kind of my husband and I just all things mom and dad and full-time jobs.
That's enough.
Awesome.
And I'm DeEtta Lee. I'm a Senior Communications Director for the American Heart Association. I am also a mom of two. Mine are a little bit younger, 6 and 1.5, and just excited to join you today.
Glad you're here. So, first, can we just talk about Joey? Tell
Sure.
I mean, that story, what happened when he was first diagnosed, and how did you know that something just wasn't right?
Sure. Um, so in this July, 9 years ago, when our son Joey was 4,
Mhm.
he was playing t-ball in the summer months, of course, when it was hot, and collapsed all of a sudden. He was complaining of stomach pains that day, but when he collapsed, it was evident that he was seizing. And if I back up a little bit, like the week prior to that, he had some kind of an episode that we saw when we were traveling, and we took him to the ER, and they had also said, yeah, well, it's probably heat. It may be a seizure. Follow up with your pediatrician. But this one looked like a full blown grand mal
Okay.
seizure. And so 911 was called immediately. EMTs came in. As he was seizing, my stepfather had had a severe stroke. And so when I was watching him and just the motions and the way that he had facial paralysis, looked like a stroke. And I remember saying to the EMT, this looks like a stroke. And there was conversation about kids that rarely happens to children. And so he was taken to the ER. When he was coming to after what we deemed the seizure, um, he was also not talking. And so it was hours later after being given fluids and just monitoring that then he did start to talk again. And so again, the team at the hospital stated we'll follow up. We think that maybe this is epilepsy and we need further testing. But we were sent home that day. And then our pediatrician had received the from the ER, the report, and said, you know what, I want to do an MRI in the interim. That week we had the MRI. She called us and said, okay, he has moya disease. And I barely know about this because it is a rare disease. I remember studying it in medical school, but he's also has an old stroke on his brain. Old meaning they know it wasn't, it could have been a week or more.
Okay.
And they know that because of the inflammation and the way that the MRI looks itself. So she said, don't don't Google. After we get off the phone, let me do some more research. Of course, we Googled.
I was gonna say,
And we inadvertently were connected with a family we found on YouTube that dedicated a YouTube story to their son from Baser Linwood, just right down the road from us. And um, he had the same disease, and
wow.
he was overseen by the specialty team in Boston. And so we connected very early on with them, which we are so lucky because they helped guide us through that rare disease progress. And then, um, so Joey definitely needed that life-saving surgery. And so we traveled to Boston for that surgery, and we stayed days later after he got out of the hospital. The surgery was successful, the Moi Moi surgery. but then he suffered another stroke while we were in Boston. And we knew that that risk was there because the disease itself is progressive and occludes the blood vessels in the brain. So what the surgery is doing is creating new pathways for those blood vessels to grow in pediatric patients, but it's a waiting game because you have to wait for those new blood vessels to grow and those pathways to become so that the brain gets what it needs. In adults, it's much different. It can be a bypass surgery so they can get immediate blood flow. But because children's vessels are so narrow and so tiny, that is not a possibility.
Okay. And is
And
it
yes,
hereditary
go ahead.
disease or how?
So there are I think there's a couple genes that they've deemed moya genes. We have not tested positive. Our family has not tested positive for those.
Okay.
However, moya can be a disease or a syndrome. Syndrome means there is some other underlying diagnoses, such as sickle cell anemia, Down syndrome, neurofibromatosis. And so this moya is a symptom because of that disease. In Joey's case, we don't know why he got it.
Okay.
And the disease itself can show up. It's very interesting. It either shows up early stages of life or like midlife in adult patients. So in that 30, 40,
Hmm.
range. Um, so that surgery, that stroke he had after his surgery, that was the most significant. That left him with some left side weakness, and then really was when we got back to Kansas City, the precipice for some more intense physical therapy. He had vision loss to his ocular, um, um, in his brain, just the ocular place that it lied, just because it needed more blood. So we knew that. We knew that the vision could come back. Um, and then months later, he suffered two more strokes on the opposite side of his brain. And when the team in Boston looked at it, they said he needs a surgery to not only the left side of his brain, but also the back. And so what you're doing though in stroke is Joey was seizing and stroking at the same time. So his brain was really taking a whammo.
Hmm.
And because of surgery, you have to wait. You have to wait for the brain to heal before you go back into surgery. And so we were months later waiting, and and as you can imagine, as a parent, you're on pins and needles, like we can't stroke again.
Right.
And so he is on blood thinner in the interim and Plavix, and we're trying to just keep him as calm as possible so we can get him back to Boston for that surgery.
At this point.
Yeah, yeah. So we did those two surgeries, and that was the first time his world-renowned surgeon had ever done the two in one instance. So it was very anxiety driven, as you can imagine, just waiting that out. And it was successful. And we again stayed in Boston for a while and then came back to Kansas City. And so from that time on till really today, um, we've been just watching through the MRIs, like all of three of those surgeries are successful. So it's very fascinating to watch as the brain is dark with not enough blood flow. And then here we are 9 years later and watch that progression of these little vessels just grow over all of those areas, because the disease is in that central Willis circle and occluding that whole area. So it never stops. The disease never stops, but the vessels are growing over those occlusions. So it's really fascinating to watch. Um, and today Joey is really stable. I mean, truly, aside from, the visible scars from the surgeries, he's people really wouldn't know that all that he's had to endure. But as we know from so many of the stroke community that we've connected with, it can be an invisible diagnosis also, because not everyone that has a stroke has visual symptoms, and it is a traumatic brain injury that you are really living with your whole life. I mean, here's a kiddo that's had 4 ischemic strokes. And again, we've met with so many adults and kids throughout the years, and that it just runs the gamut. I feel like no strokes story is the same, which is why, organizations like the AHA, it's so critical. If I didn't, even as a mom, know enough about the stroke piece, I always say to people, when in doubt, request the MRI. If there's any question, because it's so fantastic in that diagnosis process. And we've watched, even since 9 years ago, pediatric strokes.
Mhm.
It seems like the awareness is getting much larger. It's significant for children, and I think it's so important for everyone to know that in infancy and neonatal, just throughout their lives, that indeed strokes can happen to kids, and symptomatically to know those symptoms.
And
And
that's what
so,
I love about Joey's story is that, so often we think about strokes happening to our grandparents, and strokes really can affect any age. There's no discrimination. And they can happen anytime. And so it's just really important to get that stroke awareness out there.
Joey, you said he's stable now.
Yeah.
That look like going forward for him? Is he still at like a higher risk for the rest of his
Yeah,
life?
so you're still at risk for stroke. He still does suffer from what we in the neurology team deem like TIA symptoms that show as left side weakness. Like sometimes he complains of tingly left leg, or the most significant stroke damages physically was left hand. So we were really working on the fine motor skills throughout his PT, um, but then also like short-term, long-term memory things, just processing all of that. School looks a little bit different. Like we work with the district to do more homebound services, so it's more tailored to him. He loves video games. He's got a great fast wit, which is always great for me to see as a mom, especially with a teenage boy. I'm like, sure, yeah, be funny and silly and goofy. Um, but he's really smart. I mean, he's just a fighter. I think for the kids too, pediatric stroke survivors have this different mindset because they're kids,
Yeah.
right? They just want to be kids. And so there is this determination that I see from all stroke survivors in many instances, but boy, kids, they just want to be with their peers. They just want to feel the same. They want to be able to play sports. They want to, all of those things. And sometimes that's not possible.
So are there
So
things, I mean, you said you tested for the gene, but I mean, as a mom, I'm thinking, are you nervous for your daughter? Is there
sure.
something to do with
Yeah.
her?
Yeah, and she and I both have had MRIs. Like you can do that, and so we don't see any of that because of rare disease. And I think this is again where the AHA can be so helpful in, providing information like moya disease or sickle cell or any of those pieces, is that um, it's about awareness and just again, because we can do as much testing as we want, right? But we're only so good as the research. And so that's why being CPR certified and being stroke aware and heart attack aware and all of those instances are so critical to educating ourselves. And it's really simple things, right? Like every time Joey went in with the team at school, I was putting together a signs and symptoms for any of the staff that was touching him,
Mm-hmm.
because here you had a kiddo that could seize, have a transischemic attack, have a stroke. And so we as parents were having to like educate ourselves as we went forward. But then we thought, oh my gosh, like really, the general public many times doesn't know these things, and they're pretty simple. It was a one-page document, that I was giving people like these, and a lot of people know things, but it seems like again, it's not the kiddo awareness piece.
Like you said, you recognized those signs and symptoms. And we oftentimes, when we talk about signs and symptoms of stroke, we think of the word fast. So
Yeah.
that's facial weakness, arm weakness, speech, slurred speech, and
Mhm.
then time to call 911. And when it comes to a stroke, um, time is so essential. And so getting the care that you need is so important in a short period of time.
And I think that's a great point because with my stepfather that had the stroke,
Mhm.
intervention would have helped him, and
Yep.
it didn't come till days later. And so that was in the back of my mind. Although Moya Moya, there is not, we don't have that ability, but because of the way that the disease is. But in my mind, I was thinking about that situation.
I mean,
And
that's well that you were able to
right,
identify it in such a, I'm sure you were panicked and
right. Right. And there's many parents that now will say, I took my kiddo to the ER and they immediately, you know, ordered an MRI. And I get so excited. I mean, like that's such, and I, when I'm talking to them, I'm like, I'm sorry that I know this is horrible, but thank God they did that, like that is from the team perspective. And so what we've learned is it's not just awareness as a community, as a school, it's first responders, it's medical staff, it's, because again, medicine is a practice. EMTs only know, and so I feel like from a community when the AHA is doing all of their work day in, day out, it's everybody. I mean, we're only as good as what we know, right? At the end of the day.
so what thinking about your story and what would you want the parents listening to know?
Sure.
I mean, besides the symptoms, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm thinking like if I had a kid seizing, I'm not even sure my mind would go
Right.
there.
Right.
Wonder
Right.
what would be your key message to the parents who are listening and now kind of have this in
I
their head,
I think first and foremost is it is like that gut response, and it's okay to be you and your child's advocate. I mean, as we've moved forward, we've had a lot of interesting conversations with our medical team. There was a lot of advocacy that had to happen. And so it is along with that awareness of all of these symptoms and signs that we've talked about that are really simple. We're talking about minutes to make yourself aware or go to CPR training and there was one grand mal seizure that Joey was not breathing, and my husband had to administer CPR when we were trying to, change seizure medicines and titrate off. And so I was like, thank God we had gone through CPR training ourselves and before EMTs arrived on the scene. And so I think they're really simple things and tools and resources, but be okay advocating for your child and yourself. If you think like, gosh, I used to listen to that podcast and she was talking about that MRI, visually when we look at our kids, there's only so much we know.
right?
So we have the technologies today like MRI, CT scans, you know, heart monitoring machines, all of these things that it's okay to ask and and advocate for those things,
Well,
you
I
know.
think like a lot of the tools we have, like CPR, we think somebody else will know it, or
Exactly.
been through CPR training multiple times over the years, and I feel like it changes every single
Yes.
like if you're doing
Yeah.
the breaths or not doing the breaths or how many fingers, and I mean, and so keeping up to date on that, I think it requires a big commitment or knowing how to use like the AED device that
Right.
is everywhere now,
Yeah.
and it's great they're everywhere, but
Right.
for someone who knows how to use it,
Right.
how to
Yeah.
through it, and it's great.
Yeah, we now talk about CPR as hands-only CPR. So you just do the compressions,
Mhm.
and you do that to the beat of "Staying Alive" or any other song that's 100 beats per minute. We actually have a more trendy playlist now that we can get on and maybe find your favorite song, and that can be your beats per minute. And then the AED, what people oftentimes don't know is that when you take that off the wall and you open it up, it tells you and talks to you step by step. And so there's, it can't shock anybody who doesn't need to be shocked. It can't, hurt somebody even further. Um, it will not go to the next step until you've done the step that it's asked you to. And so, yeah, just kind of being aware of those things. You can learn hands-only CPR at heart.org. There's a short clip video, I think, in less than 2 minutes, so that you know how to save your own family. We know that these events oftentimes happen in the home. And so you're not learning hands-only CPR to save a random stranger, although that would be great too. Oftentimes it's, saving your own family members. And that's why it's so important.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure there's trainings throughout Kansas City. Is that available on your website too? That if you want to
Yes. If
person.
you want, you don't have to be certified to save a life. You can really, like I said, learn in those 2 minutes in that video clip. But if you'd like to get CPR certified, there's also a list. You can type in your zip code and find your closest CPR training class. So the American Heart Association even has little kits that you can purchase that have a video with a little blow up dummy that you can practice. You can hear the clicks so you know how hard to push and all of that.
Mm.
And it takes you step by step. And then once your family has learned, you can gift it to the grandparents or the babysitter or whomever that is touching your family, to know that they also know how to save someone's life if they need it.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of conversations like that in our house because my oldest are getting almost there to be able to babysit the youngest.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, we have a fire extinguisher. Do we know how to actually use the fire?
Use it.
Right.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, there was a story, I can't remember where it was, but we heard a story about a 7-year-old who had learned how to do CPR through school. They couldn't push hard enough to perform it,
mhm.
but his little brother collapsed and he told his dad step by step on how to do CPR and saved his little
Mhm.
brother's life. So, like, even, age 7
Yeah.
can make such a huge difference.
Yeah. I remember when I first learned and they were like, well, you might break ribs and like being, like, I think that's what the in-person training is valuable for from
Mhm.
my perspective as just a attendee is like the force
Yes.
that you
Yep.
use.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, that's incredible story. Okay, so kind of switching gears a little bit. Can you talk about the Heart Walk that's coming up at the end of September? I assume that's every September.
Yes.
Tell us a little
So,
about why it's such a special event.
yeah, so the Kansas City Heart and Stroke Walk is happening on September 27th. And it is an event where people come together. It's a free event for the community. You can learn CPR at that event. And survivors of all ages come together. We have little um, babies that their families rally behind. We have older folks that come, and it's just such a celebration of life. Um, not only honoring those that have survived, but honoring those that have lost their fight to heart disease as well. And so it's just a really great event. It's family friendly. There's a kids zone and face painting and um, great music by DJ Ashton Martin. It's just a really fun morning as a whole.
And what makes the Kansas City event unique compared to other Heart Rocks?
Yeah, so our event is such a big event, um, and people can walk as far as they'd like, or they can just come and enjoy the festivities. But we have amazing sponsors who have free giveaways and fun things to do. But we bring together 5,000 plus people, and it's just a really amazing walk to attend.
That's fantastic. So how, I know you fundraising is obviously a part of the Heart Walk.
Yeah.
Where do those funds go and how do they make a difference for people like Joey?
Yeah, absolutely. So, fundraising is a big part of our walk. We have three big fundraising events throughout the year, and the Heart Walk is our free family friendly event. And those funds not only go towards research for things like pediatric stroke, but also health initiatives, advocacy efforts, just really any way that we can help make the Kansas City community healthier and give everybody a chance at living a long, healthier life.
And then how can our moms get involved who are listening?
Yeah, so you can go to www.caseyheartwalk, excuse me, www.caseyheartwalk.org, and you can sign up. You can create a team if you want to, have all your family and friends come. You can create a team and be the coach for that event, or you can just come and enjoy the activities. You can get as involved or not as you'd like. But we'd love to have families come out and join us and, take the opportunity to learn hands-only CPR. Bring your kids to learn that as well. I think that you'll have a really good time.
And Layla, just looking at things like the Heart Walk and
Yeah.
personal journey with that, how do you feel when you see, I mean, 5,000 people, that's a lot, come together to, support this mission?
That advocacy and education is everything. And when we first were, when our son was diagnosed with a rare disease is in itself like something else to navigate. And for us as a family, we kind of all discussed that we wanted to share our story. So that's how the connection became with the AHA, because if it just saves one kiddo, you
Mhm.
know, and I think that's why it's so important is it's life saving. So
Well,
yeah.
it's well, you've used such heartache and I'm sure years of,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and there's a lot of people. We have such a great community of survivors around us that um it's just make yourself aware. That's what I'd say as a mom.
And I think that being a parent can a parent anytime, but especially when you have, medical issues, it can be a dark and lonely place. And
Mhm.
so being able to connect with other families that may have gone through similar things is so huge. And I think that that's what I love about Heart Walk the most is seeing these families come together and comparing stories and experiences
Mhm.
and building those relationships is
mm,
such a huge part of that recovery journey as well.
yeah, just
Yeah,
feeling.
she's it's so true. Yeah, that's so right.
So in closing, DeEtta, besides signing up for the Heart Walk, what is the one action, like first step that you want moms listening to do?
Ooh. I would say probably the most important thing for moms is, like Layla said, be your own advocate, be your children's advocate,
Mhm.
and I would take the first steps to know CPR, know what kind of signs and symptoms to look for, and trust your gut. At the end of the day, just trust your gut. Get help if it's needed.
Well, I appreciate both of you, the advocacy you do, the mission you're working toward, and thank you for sharing, Layla, your,
Oh yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I think again, awareness is such a gift to us. So I appreciate the time.
yeah, thank you.